Hello and welcome to the Brownshine Project. My name is Carlton.
And I'm Carly.
And we have a fantastic speaker today who's going to be talking about his history and give you some top tips about the tourist attractions industry. So let me introduce you to Kingston. Hello, Kingston.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. All right, Kingston, can you just tell us a little bit of background about you, what you do, why you do it, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kingston Myles. I'm the Head of Commercial Development at English Heritage, which is a really exciting role focused on commercial growth. So a really important time now for the heritage sector, for the tourism sector. Look after a number of different business areas, licensing, hospitality, holiday cottages, and commercial compliance and contracts. I've been in the heritage sector for sort of, just over 4 years now, I think 3-4 years. I've lost count. Time flies when you're having fun. But yeah, and my background is not a traditional route into heritage. I came up through events, nightlife and hospitality, and found a great home in the heritage sector where I could sort of use my skills to help the organisation.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. So, as we do with all our guests, we're going to do a quick icebreaker with you, and Carly is going to be doing this. So Carly, take it away.
I'm going to lead it because I need to, these are desperately important questions, obviously, Kingston, so we're going to get to know you a bit better. Are you a morning person or an evening person?
Probably a morning person.
Oh, first one. Terrible. We've decided everyone is an evening person, so you've broken that one already. Oh well. We'll allow it. We'll allow it. It's fine. Simpsons or Family Guy?
The Simpsons.
Oh, controversial. Would you rather swim in a pool or swim in the sea?
Oh, swim in a pool.
Watch or play sports?
Play.
What sports would you play?
Yeah, controversially, I'm really into playing badminton.
Oh.
Which is the fastest racket sport in the world, might I add. But yeah, and if not that, as Carlton and I spoke about before, a big fan of going to the gym when we're not in a variety of different lockdowns. So
excellent. Sweet or sour?
Sweet.
And being too warm or being too cold, which would you prefer?
Oh, being too cold.
And are you more of a zoo person or an aquarium person?
I'd say the zoo.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I feel like we really know you now. We can probably end the interview here.
Oh, see you guys later.
All right, see you guys. Bye-bye. No. Not that easy.
Not yet.
Not that easy. All right, we're going to start with our questions to you. So, Kingston, what does a normal day at work look like for you at the moment?
It's going to sound cliche, but I don't think there is a normal, and I don't think there's a new normal. I would say there's some really common themes around my work day, but the actual activity or the detail varies. So there's obviously, as I'm sure everyone else has said, a lot of checking of the emails and replying and filing emails. Lots and lots of Zoom calls and discussions sort of internally, externally, around the world, which is, really exciting. And then I think, the other thing that happens regularly in my working day is, overcoming challenges or hurdles and responding to kind of what's happening out there in the world for the business areas which I'm responsible for. So, not too dissimilar to a work day before the lockdown, with that sort of added curveball risk that, we might see an announcement at 5:00 that will change all those plans we wrote sort of yesterday or the day before or that we're running to. So yeah, emails, Zoom, and curveballs.
Yeah, there's nothing like a quick 5:00 announcement to ruin your week, right?
Exactly. Or to motivate everyone into sort of a 5:30 Zoom or a 6 p.m. Zoom, just as you thought you were breaking for the weekend. So.
Oh, bless you all.
Oh.
That sounds hectic, and I think everybody will have a degree of sympathy for those kinds of days. But what was your most memorable day at work ever? What's the one that sticks out?
Ever, probably all the way back pre-heritage, pre-hospitalities and nightlife, 16-year-old Kingston, got a job at Curry's PC World. And I'll never forget, I was training with two other guys, and we did this sort of classroom day before you could sort of be let loose on the sales floor. And I remember the store manager, John, being like, okay, like, you guys really want to go out there and sell? And he hit us with these quick fire questions, how much is standard delivery on this appliance? How much is it for this to be installed? How do I check stock of that? And to be honest, the three of us had no clue whatsoever. It was, you could almost write it as it was a typical trio of salesmen. We were like, oh yeah, somewhere around this point and that point. And I think it stuck with me because it was the first, moment, in that first ever job where you're really in an environment where you don't know everything, and you have to remember to really grasp the basics of what you're doing, the knowledge behind sort of the task ahead of you, and just take a moment to reflect and think it's okay not to have all the knowledge, but I need to get all of that knowledge before I run at it. And I'll just never forget being sent back 16 years old, sent back to the classroom, try again, go and learn everything you need to know about the ins and outs of Curry's and PC World. And yeah, I think that's one of the most memorable days that's definitely stuck with me.
I love that story. It's like, that first time you learn that you really just can't wing it.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of winging it. I think we can all agree, Carlton will tell you, I'm a big fan of winging it. But there are some times when you just, you really have to do your homework on it. That's brilliant.
Yeah. And the irony was, you're coming out of a school environment where, you can really just wing it, copy, paste, change the font, thank you very much, submitted, into that sort of workplace where the information isn't, you can't Google the information. You really do have to learn it and know your stuff. And I think that stuck with me, know your stuff.
Awesome. Excellent. So you've had like a varied career path, and what I would love to find out is kind of how do you kind of do self-development to yourself and kind of progress yourself into these different roles. So if you kind of walk us through kind of what you've done, and just kind of give us some like top tips of how you've kind of moved up.
Being at university and sort of having a wide variety of jobs while I studied law in Oxford, and also, worked at events in hospitality businesses and nightclubs, sort of the whole way through that, from graduating up until sort of moving into heritage, really was in that hospitality and that events sector, in, progressing management roles, sort of chasing that next promotion. Then came across to join the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford as head of visitor experience, and then got promoted to head of operations, planning and commercial for the History of Science Museum, and then obviously now head of commercial development for English Heritage, one of the largest national sort of heritage organisations. So I think, there's always been an element of, self-start behind that progression and that sort of internal fire. But in terms of within those roles and like where I've stopped to think, how am I going to self-develop, and what are my sort of top tips, and looking back, what did I do that got me to where I am? I think the first one of those is, never being afraid to, and it links back to really my most memorable day at work, never being afraid to learn something new or to try something new. Gone are the days where you had to have a degree in everything to really have an understanding of it. Now you can really teach yourself the basics, or enough to get by, enough to learn a new skill, be that something like Adobe InDesign or Illustrator, or be that about sort of finance and accounting. So I think, top tip number one for that sort of progression and moving through the ranks and through different industries is be willing to learn, and embrace, that sort of that no mentality. Top tip number two is kind of getting to the doing, and being really up for sort of being stuck into rolling up your sleeves and taking an active part in the challenge that you're trying to overcome. And I think I always chuckle because, when you run a nightclub and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the toilet's blocked, there's not a plumber pottering about to be able to help you? Can you unblock it? Or when you need to sort of grab a load of data and understand what it's telling you, you know, did you teach yourself how to use a pivot table, and are you okay doing it? Because it might be Sunday afternoon and there isn't somebody in finance that can just pivot that for you and send it back. So, you know, being really willing to roll up your sleeves and get to the doing. It'll come as no surprise that my third tip is sort of that review and self-reflection and looking back. And I'm a big fan of know, do, and review, and I spoke to those points before. And I think it's all too easy to, especially in the current climate, to keep doing something new, to keep, you know, learning more and keep doing more. And that's really, really, you know, that's phenomenal. Everyone should do that, you know, points 1 and 2. But never forget point 3, you know, stop and look back, you know, learn from what you've done. You know, ask yourself, did I achieve what I set out to achieve? Could I have learned more? Could I have done something differently? And if I was going to have another go at this task, if, you know, when my time comes to do this again, you know, be that every day because it's my job, or be that every year because it's annual, or be that on the ad hoc basis because it's a project, you know, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to approach this with everything I know now? So yeah, know, do, and review. You know, those are a motto that I really do live by. No pun intended.
That's a brilliant motto. Love that.
I do. It's brilliant.
So we have to pedal back a second though. You studied law at Oxford.
I studied law in Oxford. I studied at Oxford Brookes. Proud Oxford Brookes alumni. So the university on the hill.
I'm going to say my impressedness, shall we? I can't think of a better word for that right now. My impressedness was not at Oxford, but at the fact that you studied law. I mean, that's really interesting. What did we sometimes ask people, what did they think they were going to do as kids? What made you study law? What did you think you were going to do with that?
Do you know what? The honest truth is, I thought I was going to be banging a gavel to send people away, or to rule on sort of like, you know, guilty, not guilty. You know, I order for the plaintiff, you know, too much Judge Judy, clearly as a child, like. So, but no, I loved it. You know, I remember growing up, I was in the debating society. I was, you know, mad into politics and, you know, understanding the structure of our sort of constitution and how that varied and how it was sort of this unwritten mess of common law. And yeah, I always found that really, really interesting.
Oh.
Right up until actually studying it. And then realized that actually, you know, and I think it's a bold move to say this isn't for me, because, you know, an undergrad degree is 3 years. Then you go and do your sort of your master's with a practice course, and then you do 2 years of training. You know, it's a good 7-year. You know, it's almost like becoming a doctor, becoming a fully fledged sort of solicitor or a barrister on your own 2 feet. So you've got to know when to quit. And for me, it was, you know, graduating and then really, you know, again, like reflecting back on what I'd learned at uni and thinking, I've had some great careers and great wins here. There's a pathway for me somewhere else, and that's okay. And
Curry's PC World / nightclub managing, I mean, it's just way more interesting, right? That's
yeah, I was just a super geek, 16 years old, you know, super geek, mad into technology, you know, really into gadgets and gizmos. And I worked at Curry's PC World that was like 15 miles from my house. My mum had to drop me off. Like, I look back and I think, what a hero she was, really, you know, basically driving me to and from work so that I could be a geek in a geek's paradise. And you know, in and around studying at school in sixth form. So yeah, it's
shout out to all the mums for supporting career choices early on. I think that's
yeah, all the supportive parents, you
definitely know. Awesome. Well, thank you for that little sort of tangent, because I find it fascinating to see what sort of people choose and where they end up, because I think it's very rare that we find people that we're talking to who had a sort of definitive career and actually managed to sort of walk that path. You get distracted, and you know, it's nice. It should be an enjoyable process.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, what skills do you think are important for those people trying to get into the tourism industry? If you were to, you know, to talk to your 16-year-old self and say, these are the skills you're going to need and this is where it's going to lead you.
Yeah, I think flexibility is key. You know, there's all the interview buzzwords are essential. You know, tenacity, enthusiasm, flexibility. I think it's, you know, most important is to not be afraid to take a leap of faith, and to really be confident in your own ability and your own skill set in the job that you want to do within the sector. You know, it's a sector that I think over the past sort of 5 years, there's always been controversy. There's always been challenges. It's you know, volatile, responsive to the economy. So you just have to be confident in yourself. You know I can do this. I know that I have the skills and the passion and the drive to succeed. And I know I can add to our sector, to this part of the economy, by being in it. So, you know, it might sound a bit sort of big dream, big Disney thesis, but in reality, it is about believing in yourself. And I think that's the most important thing. I think in terms of practical skills, you know, beyond that sort of self-belief and that passion, I think you have to have a willingness to appreciate the tourism sector, and particularly the heritage part of that, is a sort of a quasi sector in some sense. You know, elements of it are fully public funded, elements of it are fully commercial, and you really have to know and embrace the part of the sector that you're going to join and the nuances that come alongside that, and things like decision making processes, or, you know, the financial limitations on expenditure or state aid. You know, you really have to accept that it's not as cut and dry as a corporate commercial sort of, you know, corporate America business. It's got its nuances, and you have to be willing to find an organization with which has the groove that you can fit into and that you're happy with and you understand and you appreciate that.
So I've got another question for you, Kingston, and it's all basically talking about your experience and what advice were you given. So kind of the question is, what is the best career advice you've ever been given in your career so far?
The best career advice I've probably ever been given is never to quit, I think. And that I've watched and witnessed, you know, with my parents, you know, starting a small business, building a business, and then, you know, still having elements of that business now, sort of 23 years on. I think it's from the people that I look to for inspiration within their own career paths, you know, all the big name inspirational celebrities, and the lesser heard celebrities. You know, I was reading or listening to an audiobook by David Goggins the other day, Can't Hurt Me, a phenomenal audiobook. It's about 15 hours long because it jumps in and out of conversation with the narrator and David, and it just hammers home that, you know, your human mind and the human body is capable of achieving things far beyond the limit at which we first contemplate quitting, or far beyond the limit of which we first contemplate giving up. So, you know, when you're 5,000 lines deep into a spreadsheet, or you're hundreds of slides into creating a presentation, you know, whatever it may be relevant to the task at hand, your mind and your body can achieve so much more than where you first think of giving up, and where you second time round think of giving up. And people that run a marathon, and having ran 2 half marathons, so we can like lump them together and call it a whole. But, you know, people that run distance, you know, marathons always talk about the wall, and pushing through the wall. And I think that the wall exists in everything we do, and never quitting is the most important piece of career advice, you know, that I've lived, I've witnessed, and I continue to hear from those that reach sort of the mountaintop of success within their sort of chosen fields.
That's amazing. Absolutely fantastic. So never quit. Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I'm also going to say, I think we should, we're now going to start a brand sign project running club. I run long distance, Kingston, and it was the first thing I thought of when you started describing about at which point you sort of contemplate giving up versus when you actually really are ready to give up.
Yeah,
and the distance between those 2 points is actually really massive.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in this current climate, we're all locked down at home. People have been working from home. People have been furloughed. it can be a really challenging time for, everyone's mental and physical well-being. And I think, for me, part of what's carried me through a very abnormal period of 7 or 8 months is knowing that, hey, I've got this far, I can get further. I've overcome, the challenges and nuances of shared professional living. I've overcome those nuances of not seeing friends and family. So we can just keep going and we can keep pushing on. And obviously, everyone's individual tolerance is different. And, at times when the right moment is to stop and say, actually, I need a hand with this. I need a bit of help or support, guidance. Then of course reach out for that, but reach out to those coaches and mentors that will keep helping you become the best version of you that you can, and that support network that will keep you moving forward. And I always chuckle at the quote that sharks die if they stop moving. So be a shark, keep moving at whatever pace it is, just keep moving.
That's great. I just want to kind of piggyback on what you mentioned about networking, because I think that's so important, especially if you want to try and get into that. So kind of with your experience, what is the best way to network, especially during this period of time that we're in?
Yeah, so I think we've all got an element of Zoom fatigue. So I'll start by saying, first and foremost, be bold with how you network and connect with people, and don't be afraid to find a groove that works for you. In terms of networking during this period and sort of what's worked for me, what's not worked for me, this period and before, I think LinkedIn is a critical tool. I post little and often on LinkedIn because I like when I post for it to be of value and a statement, not sort of like, hey, look at the pattern in my coffee at my desk today type post, because I think people will gently switch off to that. But I think you should leverage LinkedIn, even as a passive user, scrolling, reading, reviewing, following businesses, connecting with businesses. I think it's good to have your finger on the pulse. When the time is right, be bold, jump in, drop people a message, give them a direct message, let them know who you are, why you want to connect with them, and what you think connecting with them will get you. Don't just send a sort of a blank connection in the wind, sort of, so-and-so from such and such a company would like to connect with you, but hasn't spoken to you. And I think, treat LinkedIn like networking at a conference. You wouldn't just stand in front of somebody without speaking to them. So don't just connect with them without sort of putting a message to it. I think I mentioned sort of Zoom fatigue and sort of how best to benefit from keeping in touch with networking. I have my phone glued to my hand all the time, and Carlton will know, if you message me on LinkedIn, it's probably going to go unread. Yeah. I check my LinkedIn. I'm a passive LinkedIn user, and I do try to, when I can, get through my sort of in my LinkedIn mail. But I'm a big fan of people saying, hey, have you got a number? Can I drop you a WhatsApp or a text message? So for me, that works. And it embeds that element of networking in with my sort of, the platform I use to socially communicate. So I'm on it all the time. Find the communication method that works for you. Don't feel obliged to attend, virtual conferences non-stop. Focus your energy. So if you are going to be on Zoom, be an active user in a conference. Don't just sit there with your camera off, not participating, not listening. Don't tick a box. When you sign up for a conference, know what you want to get out of it, do the right thing, and then review it afterwards. Live by the motto.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were guilty initially in the first stage of lockdown, that we signed up for a lot of things. There was a lot of content being thrown out, just pretty much continuously. You could have spent your, every waking hour on some Zoom webinar of, one sort or another. And actually, I got to a point where I was seeing the same people over and over again, and I was hearing the same thing over and over again. And, we were sort of, everyone was looking for a solution. Nobody had a solution.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. If all of us could have done with a bit of a step back and thought, actually, what am I getting here? What am I giving my time to? And what am I getting out of it?
And it goes back to that whole concept of why I try to post sort of little and often, be active when it matters, and then be active in the right places, So if I do want to get in touch with someone, I'll drop them a text, or I'll pick up the phone and I'll talk to them. You know, it's not letting Zoom and email sort of rule our lives, or other video conferencing platforms, as it were.
Other conferencing platforms are available.
Yeah, other platforms are available, but they're not there to run our lives. They're there as enabling tools, and you know, we should just always bear that in mind in this current climate.
Yeah, you've just made me think, and I want to just tell a very quick story, because I think it's kind of relevant. Is that you said about finding communication tools that work for you? It's actually also figuring out what works for someone else. But if you do want to really connect with somebody, is that what you might find preferable might not necessarily work for that other person, and try and figure something out. I used to have a boss, just generally, statement over. But we used to sit, I sat just outside of his office door. He was in the other side of the office, and we would do this thing where I would email him and he would talk to me through the door. And we figured out that basically he hates email and I hate being spoken to while I'm doing something. And we were both doing the thing that the other person hated, because that was how we wanted to be communicated to. So we got to a point where I would talk to him and he would email me. And that worked, because that was the way we sort of, you know, appreciated being contacted. But yeah, it took us a long while to figure out why we wound each other up so much at that point. Because you just need to learn other people's contact preferences. And you're right, if someone likes talking to you via Twitter or via WhatsApp or LinkedIn or whatever, is kind of meet them where they are and halfway. If you really want to connect with someone, it's really important.
Yeah. It's important now more than ever as well that we do take on board other people's preferences. You know, work is invading our home spaces. You know, we're all working from a space which usually we come to decompress or to break away, or we might work from home sort of 1 or 2 days a week. So, you know, where people do have really clear contact preferences, I think we should follow them. I've got a tagline in my work email signature that says, you know, I'm working from home, and alongside office hours, I might be working early or late, but I'll never expect a reply outside of your own office hours. And it's my way of saying, hey, I might have emailed you at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. I don't expect you to be here at 5 a.m, because I respect your working time and your contact preferences. But just so you know, I like to sometimes work around the working day as well as through it.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. Like you say, well, work is invading our homes, and we need to be really conscious of not really sort of being fatigued by that. It's really important. So that does bring us to our kind of final question, which is, if we do want to get in touch with you, Kingston, where can we find you?
You find me at 5 o'clock in the morning on the following platforms.
On Zoom.
On Zoom, yeah. Open webinar invite, 5 o'clock. Here's the meeting link. No. So obviously LinkedIn, you know, Kingston Myles, Myles with a Y, so Myles, and no E on Kingston. I've seen all sorts of, I have to say, before I go into contact preferences, just to close on a bit of humour, throughout the lockdown period, obviously a lot of communication has been by email. And despite the fact that my email address really clearly spells out my name, I've seen the best variations on my own name, all the way to being emailed with, "Hey, Kingdom." And I was like, this is new. We'll take this one. But no, you can find me on LinkedIn, Kingston Myles. And obviously, you know, message me on LinkedIn, but let me know why you're messaging, what you want to talk about. I'm really open to finding time, you know, at any point to support people who want to talk about the sector, or what it's like to work in the sector, or that think the sector might not be for them, but in actual fact, they could be the golden piece of skill or knowledge that we're missing right now. And, you know, totally happy then to link up with people on Zoom if that works for them, or, you know, by WhatsApp if they just like a sort of casual chat to bounce ideas backwards and forwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your knowledge with us today. It's been absolutely inspiring. So thank you so much, Kingston, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Probably selling my no-do review merch online somewhere. So watch this space.
I need a t-shirt. Definitely.
Yeah.